era. Congress is considering a new bill that would give unprecedented power to restructure Puerto Rico's debts. We'll give it to Puerto Rico. Those debts currently stand at $72 billion, not to mention billions and billions more in unfunded retirement promises. Joining us is the representative who introduced the bill, Sean Duffy of Wisconsin, and also Hector Negroni. He's the CEO of Fundamental Credit Opportunities, which owns Puerto Rico bonds. Hector doesn't like the bill. He thinks it's dangerous for the municipal bond market. Gentlemen, good to have you here. Great to have you be able to talk to each other. Representative Duffy, you've got Mr. Negroni sitting here. He doesn't like this bill. Sell it to him.
Well, he can tell us why a little bit later, but I'm really selling this to the American people. We all know that Puerto Rico is having a financial and economic crisis. And so what we have to do in Congress, as one of our territories, we have to make sure we allow some very strict oversight so they can get their budget and finances in order. And then also we have to make sure we have a systematic approach to restructuring debt so our bondholders can be on the path to getting some repayment, and Puerto Rico can get back on the path to prosperity. And if Congress doesn't act, and I think a lot of the bondholders who own Puerto Rican debt, they don't want Congress to act, because if you have a humanitarian crisis on the island, they believe that the American taxpayer, through the Congress, will send billions of dollars down to Puerto Rico, and the bonds that they bought at 50 or 60 cents in the dollar will now be worth 100 cents in the dollar, and they're going to make a huge return on their investment. The bottom line is we need to protect the American taxpayer from a future taxpayer bailout, and restructuring debt through this control board, I think, is the right approach.
Hector?
First of all, I want to commend Congressman Duffy on his efforts to address this. You know, I was a big fan of his original foray to do a simple fiscal control board combined with regular Chapter 9, because in my view, this is a municipal liquidity crisis. I think the extent to which the crisis has been portrayed by Treasury and the administration probably is overplayed in terms of what it means, and there's a little heavy-handed response now from this current bill.
It's not a humanitarian crisis, as he says?
I'm not going to deny the fact that Puerto Rico has an extraordinary number of challenges. But if you've been to Puerto Rico, as I was just last week, you realize it still is an unbelievable, wonderful place. There's an economy that's functioning down there. It's anemic. There's a bloated government that needs to be resized. And there is, very importantly, the capacity to perform on some of the debt. I think what's different now is we've migrated from the original effort, which was put forth by both Congressman Pierluisi in respect of Chapter 9 and Congressman Duffy himself in respect of packaging a fiscal control board with Chapter 9, to something that's broader and more invasive and represents potential risks to the municipal marketplace, which I'd like to elaborate on.
Well, you have a specific issue with what's called a stay in this bill. Can you explain what that is very quickly and why you don't like it?
Sure. I actually have three specific issues. Stay is near the top of the list. The issue with the stay is, at the moment, the idea is that there's a timeout. People want there to be a cessation of activity so Puerto Rico can organize itself. The stay is imbalanced, inequitable, it's unilateral. What it does is, as soon as the law is enacted, creditors, bondholders only, cannot pursue their remedies. So individual bondholders have no rights. This creates very little incentive for Puerto Rico to actually engage consensually with them. And they can default on their debt. There are payments coming due in May and July. They can default on that before the board's even built, and they can quickly raid the cookie jar and spend money for other purposes. They can prioritize payments and put bondholders on the sidelines and freeze them out from pursuing their remedies. That's a dangerous precedent.
Representative Duffy, why would you want that to happen? My experience covering Greece for the last 6 years is that if you don't put pressure on a government to reform itself, and by the way, you could punish the bondholders to zero, and Puerto Rico would still be in trouble because they still can't pay their debts. They have to do some very, very tough decisions that thus far they have refused to do. And if you take the pressure off from these other payments, they're even less likely to do them. Why would you want to give them that breathing room when they really need to make some hard decisions?
We don't take the pressure off. That's actually what our bill does. We have a very strong control board that's going to impose some great fiscal restraint on the island.
But there's a huge window from when the bill gets signed to when that control board exists that the Puerto Rican government can spend what it wants, right?
Because when the control board is going to have a great deal of power, but we don't know the finances, per Hector's point. So if there's actually more money there than we think, which I doubt, but if there is, we're all going to have a chance to look and see what the revenue is, and we can see if there's a restructuring of debt, what it should be. And it's going to take some time to figure out the finances of the island. And if you don't allow a pause period, which ours gives us to February 15th of 17, they don't have the money to pay. And so we need to have this pause to allow the control board to get into place, to start talking to creditors. And from Hector's point, he should be proud in the fact that if he doesn't find an honest partner in negotiating his debt with the Puerto Rican people, the Fiscal Control Board steps in and they have an honest partner to negotiate with, so we can get a resolution to this debt crisis.
Before you respond, I just want to tell the viewers that the Puerto Rican government hasn't been able to file numbers and budgets for years. I mean, retroactively, we're still trying to find out fiscally what's happened with Puerto Rico. That's how much of a mess their books are.
The one problem, to the Congressman's point, I think it's very fair. You know, we would hope that we could find a means and a venue by which, if they didn't honor their Constitution, we could, you know, find satisfaction in the courts. This doesn't provide for that. Currently, the framework provides for a board to pursue remedies for bondholders that doesn't follow any known prescription.
Hector, that's not true. Hector,
I'm sorry.
That's not true. You got to look at the bill. There's a system to have an honest negotiation, but if it doesn't work, there is the capability of going to court. Now, this isn't a bankruptcy, but you would use bankruptcy courts to actually navigate the differences between the debtors and the creditors. So we're not going to exclude you from the courts in our legislation.
But importantly, Congressman, the guideline for the priority of debt payments that's under the Constitution, under which investors made their investments and set precedents across this nation, aren't specified or honored in this process. It's unclear to me what debt priorities will be listed. If those were clarified, that would go a long way. As it currently is, the priorities under the Puerto Rican's own Constitution are upended here. That makes it very difficult to understand how people would do business in Puerto Rico if Puerto Rico law in and of itself can't be applied.
But Hector, that's the argument that you can make to the courts if you can't negotiate a resolution. But the bottom line is, and I think this is important, listen, and Hector, I understand your concern, but if the Congress does nothing, and we don't act, this crisis that'll come to the island will be met with a call for the taxpayers to bail out the island. They don't have enough money to pay. We have schools that are closing down, kids that don't have school buses with gas. We have hospitals that don't have electricity. So either we can say, listen, we're going to set up a forum for the bondholders and the island to negotiate, or you're going to send taxpayer money. Our option in Congress is going to be, we got to facilitate a dialogue between those who made the investment in the island, who bought bonds at 50, 60 cents in the dollar, to come up with a resolution. But we are going to protect the citizens of the island and the American taxpayer from bailing out bondholders who potentially have made really good investments.
First of all, the vast majority of bondholders, well over $40 billion, bought bonds at original issue.
I was going to say, where do you get 50 and 60 cents?
This idea that, like,
people paid 100 cents on the
they may be trading there now, but the idea that, like, these bonds all rest in some hands of some vulture opportunists doesn't stand up to the facts. The vote is that at least $40 billion of the debt is held by individuals and mutual funds on the island. But more importantly is, by the Commonwealth's own numbers, their only debt service requirements for July can be met, and those are those for the general obligation debt. They say they have $1.85 billion. There's only $900 million required for debt service. It can be met. The Fiscal Control Board, however, is very important to address the expense matters. We're conflating the expense with the debt.
But Hector, with no action, you're going to have chaos on the island. You're going to have chaos within the bond market. You're going to have chaos with the creditors. So let's set up a systematic approach so we can walk through the debt, have the pause period, see what the finances are of the island, because we don't know what they are right now. We want the Congress to have an opportunity to see those finances. We want you to be able to see those finances, so there's clarity and transparency.
Representative Duffy, what strikes me is when I look at the numbers and my experience in Greece, there's a humanitarian crisis coming to Puerto Rico regardless. They just don't have the money for a lot of basic stuff. No matter what you do, you're going to tell pensioners, they're not going to get as much as they thought they were going to get. You're going to tell people that they're going to have to pay a heck of a lot more for their water and their electricity. And to them, no matter what, it's going to feel like a humanitarian crisis.
I think that's a bit of an overstatement of the facts. The truth of the matter is they have an enormous expense base that they haven't dealt with. They undercollect revenues. Yes, they have some insolvent debts. But the big factor is there's an opportunity on the table. There's a consensual offer on the table, using the primary obligation that they have, which is the general obligation, constitutional protected debt, which allows for them to have time. By honoring their constitutional debt, by doing a consensual deal with GO bondholders, they'd show honor for their Constitution, they'd allow the government to be open, they'd forestall litigation. It's a very successful outcome. This bill with a stay will chill that.
Representative Duffy, thank you so much. Hector, thank you so much. Should we give each other the numbers, phone numbers, so that way you can...
I know the Congressman's office. They're wonderful people.
Thanks. We really appreciate it, Representative. All right, let's get to Dom Chu for a market flash.
I love it, Michelle. Such harmony there on Puerto Rico. Anyway, Fitbit shares right now. We want to call your